The Abbasid rulers promised unity, yet at their first reconciliation feast for the defeated Umayyads, they turned the tables into a massacre. Out of such brutality emerged one of history's most brilliant intellectual blossomings. How could a dynasty start in blood, but leave a legacy in knowledge, mathematics, and medicine that influenced centuries of human progress? The answer lies in understanding how power and culture influence each other, and why the same forces that elevated the Abbasids to greatness also began to tear them apart. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Before we begin, just a quick housekeeping note. If you enjoy what I'm doing, a like and subscribe would be really helpful. It goes a long way in keeping the channel going. And don't forget to drop a comment. I'd really love to know what you think. The Abbasids celebrated their victory with more than just bloodshed. They fundamentally redirected the empire's course by abandoning Damascus and establishing Baghdad as their capital along the banks of the Tigris. This was not merely a relocation of court and officials, but a conscious decision to shift the empire's center of gravity eastward, away from the Mediterranean and towards Persia, India, and the expansive lands across Asia. Why abandon the Mediterranean when its seas had connected empires for centuries? Those waters provided fertile grounds, well-established trade routes, and ancient cities. The Umayyads had linked themselves to this system, but the Abbasids had loftier ambitions. They aimed to position their capital at the nexus of far-reaching networks, connections of rivers, deserts, and caravans that extended deeper into Central Asia and India. Placing their palace on the Tigris positioned them at the heart of this bustling traffic. Baghdad's location communicated to the world that this was a carefully planned project, not a mere accident of history. Built in the desert as a circular fortress city, it was designed with mathematical precision. At its center was the palace and mosque, surrounded by concentric walls. It embodied order in the earth itself. The geometric symmetry conveyed a message. Authority flowed outward, with the ruler serving as the central unifying figure. 30 miles from the ruins of the ancient Persian capital of Ctesiphon, its placement also paid homage to older traditions while symbolizing a new beginning. This new orientation linked the empire more closely to Persian models of administration. Persian scribes, advisors, and ceremonies became part of Abbasid governance. Many historians regard the move as a crucial step toward the east. Some even describe it as the beginning of Persian influence on the Caliphate, though others caution that it was not a complete Persianization. What is clear is that the Caliphate now looked east, drawing on the wealth of Persia and India instead of prioritizing conquest in Byzantium or across the Mediterranean. Ambitions for Constantinople and raids into the west faded into the background. The risks were evident. By shifting focus away from Damascus and Syria, the caliphs also moved further from the Mediterranean grain fields and naval routes that had long supplied and connected empires. Reaching the sea from Baghdad meant longer, more arduous journeys. Administering distant provinces, such as Egypt or North Africa, became more complex. However, the Abbasids believed that the rewards outweighed these costs. The eastern lands possessed richer reserves of wealth, especially in agriculture, trade, and the transmission of ideas. Think of the Mediterranean as a sealed bowl. Trade there moved in circles, limited by the same familiar coasts. The Tigris, on the other hand, flowed outward toward open lands and continental crossings. Caravans brought silks from China. Merchants transported spices from India. Metals, manuscripts, and textiles arrived over mountain passes and along river valleys. By positioning themselves at this hub, the Abbasids could channel resources from every direction. Commerce flourished as Baghdad transformed into a vibrant marketplace echoing distant lands. Travelers from Central Asia and North Africa found common ground within its bustling bazaars. With wealth flowing in, the Abbasids financed not only palaces and mosques, but also hospitals and libraries. This choice was both practical and symbolic, ensuring the capital could sustain grandeur on a new scale. The city's circular design held profound meaning. A circle symbolized harmony and balance, with no edge higher than another. The Caliph at the center embodied unity for a diverse empire. This architectural statement reinforced that Baghdad was no provincial town that rose by chance, but a true world power, its own empire, not merely a reflection of Rome or Byzantium. However, every grand design contains tension. By shifting focus eastwards, the caliphs expanded their empire to include Persians, Arabs, Turks, and Indians. This diversity made the empire lively, but also challenging to govern. Managing such a broad spectrum required more than military strength. It demanded systems of administration, learning, and culture capable of uniting differences under a shared vision. Unity had to be fostered both in thought and in action. From the beginning, the new capital supported this process. Trade brought not only wealth, but also texts and ideas. Economic exchanges carried manuscripts alongside goods. Administrators sought sciences that could bring order to taxation, surveying, and timekeeping. Baghdad became fertile ground for scholarship because its markets and offices required it. The new capital attracted both merchants and scholars, as well as pilgrims and translators. Nevertheless, Baghdad was not an invulnerable utopia. To replant the capital was to expose it to new pressures. Its power depended on rivers that could flood or dry up. Its wealth relied on trade routes that might shift elsewhere. The diversity that filled its streets created strength, but also rival claims and expectations. What seemed like a perfect balance at first could prove fragile over time. Yet in those early centuries, Baghdad held the promise of a rising order. It enabled the Abbasids to present themselves as guardians of a broader civilization, spanning continents. They were no longer a dynasty clinging to an inherited throne in Damascus. They were architects of a new world, positioned at the heart of its most fertile connections. That vision attracted people. For subjects across the Caliphate, Baghdad represented unity supported by new networks: India to the east, Central Asia to the north, Arabia to the south, and still the Mediterranean to the west. Few other capitals could boast so many connections. Their strength lay in weaving these together. But when you weave threads so wide, strains appear. The same currents that carried wealth also brought disputes, competing ideas, and ambitious rivals. Placing the Caliphate at the world's crossroads ensured richness, but it also brought pressure. The move to Baghdad was an experiment in ruling through connections as much as conquests. Its opportunity and fragility came from the same source. In short, Baghdad signaled a shift. Less energy was spent pursuing victories in the West. More was invested in fostering ties with India, Persia, and Central Asia. From that eastern stance arose the conditions that transformed Baghdad into more than merely a political capital. It became a place where culture and learning could serve as tools of power. And that raises perhaps the most significant question of all. How did rulers who built their dynasty in bloodshed turn into patrons of books and scholars? The answer lay in a new institution that emerged in Baghdad during the early 9th century, around 830, the House of Wisdom. More than a palace library, it became a center for translation and research, intentionally financed by the Abbasid Caliphs. Here, knowledge was accumulated, translated, debated, and reshaped. The caliphs invested their resources in scribes, scholars, and paper. For them, wisdom was not a distraction from rule, but a tool of it. Supporting learning validated their claim to legitimacy in ways that armies or fortresses alone could not. This was important because their empire was composed of many peoples and traditions. Swords could enforce obedience, but ideas could unify identities. By portraying themselves as patrons of learning, the Abbasids positioned themselves not only as conquerors, but as custodians of civilization itself. Their empire became not just powerful, but cosmopolitan, rich, rational, and universal. To achieve this, the Abbasids looked far beyond their own frontiers. They sought knowledge wherever it was found, from Greece, India, and Persia. Scrolls of philosophy, manuals of mathematics, and treatises on medicine crossed languages and deserts to reach Baghdad. One Byzantine treaty even required that a copy of Ptolemy's geography be sent east, a reminder that Baghdad did not simply wait for knowledge to arrive, but demanded it as part of diplomacy. Translation quickly became their hallmark endeavor. In the House of Wisdom, entire teams worked together on texts. A common approach was to move from Greek into Syriac, the language of many Christian scholars, and then into Arabic. This was not passive copying. A reader dictated in one language, another wrote in the next, and arguments emerged as they debated word choices. The act of translation became a form of interpretation. Ideas evolved as they acquired new terms and meanings. Aristotle was central to this process. His works on logic and natural philosophy provided a framework of reasoning that outlasted his own era. When translated into Arabic, they were not preserved as relics, but were reshaped with new commentary that connected rational argument to religious thought. In this way, Aristotle became a living voice within Islamic, Christian, and Jewish traditions alike. Centuries later, these translated versions would return to Europe, reigniting the continent's interest in logic and science. Other ideas came from India. The House of Wisdom played a pivotal role in establishing place value numerals and the zero symbol as a new standard for calculation. On Indian soil, these symbols had been quietly revolutionary. In Baghdad, they were refined into a system that merchants, astronomers, and administrators could use. Behind every modern ledger or program of code lies that same inheritance. Numbers carried to Baghdad, explained, tested, and disseminated. Persia, too, offered more than administrative skills. Its long tradition of kingship supplied manuals on how to govern sprawling realms. Such texts were translated alongside works of medicine or mathematics. For the Abbasids, translating them was a means of claiming continuity. They were not only reforming Islam's leadership, but also tapping into an older stream of imperial wisdom. To govern justly thus became the culmination of divine guidance and ancient precedent. The House of Wisdom was more of a workshop than just a storehouse. Astronomers recalculated star tables. Physicians gathered works on anatomy and medicine. Engineers studied water wheels and surveying tools. When original texts had gaps, local scholars filled them with commentaries, questions, or experiments. By translating texts through dialogue rather than mechanical copying, the Abbasids fostered active inquiry. Think of Baghdad as a vessel into which flows of knowledge poured. Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Persian administration, and local traditions. Each had limited reach on its own, but combined, they created a synthesis usable across cultures. Baghdad's scholars didn't hoard fragments. They built a larger world of reasoning where different peoples could participate. This influence spread outward. Syriac-speaking Christian translators played a crucial role, particularly in translating Aristotle and Galen into their own language first, and then into Arabic. Jewish scholars also engaged with these texts and integrated them into their traditions. This cosmopolitan exchange meant that when Latin scholars rediscovered Aristotle centuries later, they often did so through Arabic intermediaries. The Abbasids, in effect, kept the flame alive. For the caliphs, this was as much political theater as it was an intellectual flowering. Books lined their palaces as visibly as guards operated their gates. The message was clear. This was not a barbarian dynasty, but a civilization at the center of the world's learning. Armies might win battles, but knowledge projected authority more deeply, suggesting the caliphate itself stood as the heir of centuries of wisdom. One sentence says it all: learning defended what armies could not. Over time, the House of Wisdom gathered hundreds of manuscripts, many carried by caravan from distant lands. Paper, recently adopted from China, made such collecting feasible on a new scale. Knowledge here was treated almost as currency, something to accumulate, convert, and invest, a reservoir of power as valuable as coin or grain. Caliphs funding this project knew that a fortress might fall, but a translated book could continue to shape thought long after its sponsor had died. Practical life soon mirrored this intellectual effort. Arithmetic clarified taxation and eased commerce. Astronomy guided prayer times and assisted in designing calendars. Medicine evolved into hospitals, making healing less dependent on superstition and more grounded in observation. Knowledge, once taken from foreign shelves, quickly entered households, schools, and courts. The House of Wisdom was no mere decorative feature. It was a functioning engine that merged faith and reason, past and present, east and west. Its legacy crossed both cultural and confessional boundaries. You can understand why such an institution was important. It demonstrated how political will, trade, and scholarly curiosity could combine to transform everyday life. But what the House of Wisdom most powerfully revealed was the strength of numbers. The translated texts did not merely deal with theory. They provided the tools for new methods of calculation, tools that found applications in taxation, trade, astronomy, and inheritance law. And it is here, with the story of these numbers and the mathematicians who developed them, that we see how knowledge moved from the study table into every aspect of daily life. Many of the mathematical tools we depend on today were systematized in Baghdad during the 9th century. The refinement of place value arithmetic and the introduction of algebra gave written numbers new power, shaping everything from trade ledgers to stargazing. At the center of this transformation was a single figure, the mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. The story started with the arrival of Indian numerals. Travelers and merchants introduced the Abbasid world to a small set of digits and the radical concept of zero. The circle representing nothing allowed numbers to shift place by place, with each position assigning them different values. Previously, calculating with Roman numerals or other ancient systems was cumbersome, especially for large sums or fractions. Balancing taxes with such systems was slow, error-prone, and difficult to adapt to complex needs. In contrast, the Indian system provided clarity and efficiency at a glance. Initially, skepticism was inevitable. How could a mark for nothing serve as a fundamental element of arithmetic? Yet once scribes began using the new symbols, doubts quickly disappeared. Columns aligned neatly, addition and subtraction became easier, and fractions could be managed consistently. Merchants realized they could keep clearer accounts. Officials recognized they could tabulate revenue more reliably. A symbol that represented absence proved to be the most useful number of all. It was Al-Khwarizmi who organized these insights into a coherent framework. Working within the House of Wisdom, he examined the imported numerals and adapted them to the administrative needs of the Abbasid state. His most renowned treatise, written in the early 9th century, outlined methods for solving equations in a step-by-step manner. In it, he introduced the term Algebra, meaning restoring or completion. From this word, we get the name algebra. By reducing problems to standard procedures, he provided mathematics with a stable foundation. For Al-Khwarizmi, algebra was not detached speculation. It was a tool to resolve factual disputes. Islamic law required careful division of estates among heirs. Tax registers demanded order when calculating levies. Prayer schedules depended on the sun's movement through the sky. His systematic methods addressed these needs. Equations that could otherwise confound administrators were restructured into predictable steps. The immediate benefit was clear: clearer inheritance shares, fairer assessments, and more reliable calendars. Consider inheritance. Imagine a father leaves behind property to be divided between sons and daughters, with portions fixed by religious law. Without standardized methods, disputes could easily arise. Algebra made the calculation straightforward. The unknown share became a variable, balanced against the known quantities. Step by step, the equation clarified the rightful division. In this way, mathematics brought order to what could otherwise descend into conflict. Equally important was taxation. The empire relied on steady revenues from vast lands spanning various climates and regions. To weigh, measure, collect, and distribute accurately, clerks needed more than just memory. They required methods. Al-Khwarizmi's procedures provided a way to convert complex conditions into precise results. Fractions of harvests, shares for the treasury, and exemptions for certain lands could all be aligned numerically. Astronomy also benefited. The same calculations used for organizing taxes and estates improved star tables. Prayer times, based on the sun's position and moon phases, gave astronomy both scientific and devotional significance. Algebraic methods simplified these tasks. By working within consistent rules, astronomers could predict positions more accurately. Navigation across deserts and farming cycles both improved with this knowledge. This achievement was more than just a collection of improvements. Baghdad integrated symbols from India into a system that served the empire. Al-Khwarizmi's work showed how symbols could be manipulated according to rules to solve abstract problems. This structure underpins what we now call algorithms, systematic steps performed from start to finish. His name has become attached to the concept. When we speak of algorithms today, especially in computing, we reflect a tradition that dates back over 1,000 years. Think of the contrast as moving from an abacus to a modern spreadsheet. One relies on manually entered tokens that are pushed back and forth. The other applies set rules across entire pages of data. The Abbasid scholars did not yet have computers, but they invented the procedures that later machines would automate. This marked the birth of symbolic problem solving. What made this leap possible was context. The Abbasid caliphs required order in governance, including predictable taxes, reliable records, and laws respected across their territories. The faithful required tools for fair division of estates and accurate observance of rituals. Scholars needed a framework to make sense of translations from Greece, Persia, and India. Under this pressure, imported numbers found fertile ground. Al-Khwarizmi provided the bridge, structured methods linking symbols, rules, and practice. As these methods spread, adoption extended beyond clerks and judges. Traders found that decimals could stabilize the exchange of weights and currencies. Engineers measuring land or constructing aqueducts saw their work simplified. Even in education, students could learn structured reasoning by practicing equations. Algebra became not just a tool for specialists, but part of a broader intellectual fabric. The spread extended beyond the empire's borders. Translations of Al-Khwarizmi's works later reached Europe, bringing with them the numerals and calculation rules. Over centuries, these texts helped replace Roman numerals and introduced more efficient calculation methods. By the time European scholars rediscovered classical philosophy, they did so through a lens already refined by Arabic algebra. The mathematics of Baghdad laid foundations that subsequent generations built upon. There is a striking irony here. A system that once seemed foreign and uncertain became the most familiar backdrop of modern life. From typing digits on a screen to applying formulas in software, the structures Al-Khwarizmi described remain embedded in daily routines. His methods did not appear as sudden discoveries, but developed at the point where scholarship met clerical needs, where translation intersected with governance. That combination ensured their longevity. The Abbasids, therefore, contributed not just by preserving knowledge, but by adapting it. Al-Khwarizmi adapted Indian numerals for use in Islamic law and imperial administration, thereby founding a discipline that outlived both the empire and the dynasty. To look at algebra today is to see the imprint of political necessity transformed into intellectual heritage. The image that best captures this is of a Baghdad official examining a chart, determining tax contributions line by line. At the same time, nearby, an astronomer works on equations to plot the moon. Each relies on the same structured approach, the same algebraic reasoning. This unification of work across offices and observatories provided coherence to an empire that governed diverse peoples and lands. It was mathematics turned into statecraft. And yet, these numbers and rules did not only serve earthly matters, they also allowed scholars to conceptualize the world in new ways. Equations that helped divide inheritance could also measure distances across the earth and map the heavens. Algebra thus became more than a tool for governance. It became a means of exploring the size and shape of the planet itself. If algebra provided the Abbasids with tools for order and calculation, geography and astronomy demonstrated the extent to which those tools could be applied. In Baghdad, numbers were used not only for income or law, but also for mapping the wider world. The vision stretched from city walls to seas, deserts, and skies. The House of Wisdom became central to this endeavor. It was less a library and more a workshop, where questions about earth and heaven were examined using instruments and figures. For an empire as vast as the Abbasids, this knowledge was practical. Ruling effectively involved knowing how far cities were apart, how long journeys took, and how seasons affected travel. For believers, it also meant knowing where to turn in prayer, when to break fasts, and how to measure time accurately. Ancient texts played a significant role, particularly Ptolemy's geography, which was translated into Arabic during this period. it provided a framework of coordinates for lands known to the Romans and Greeks. However, Abbasid scholars regarded it as a foundation, not a finished work. They used Ptolemy as a starting point and then enriched it with caravan reports, sailors' notes, and fresh observations from across their territories. The combination of older theory and new data expanded the Mediterranean model to include India, Arabia, and lands beyond the Oxus. Caravans recorded distances across deserts. Sailors mapped harbors and coastlines. Tax collectors took measurements between districts. Piece by piece, Baghdad's scholars refined the outlines of maps, expanding them beyond Ptolemy's reach. What once served a small part of the ancient world grew into a chart of an empire spanning continents. It was effectively the first attempt to redraw global space on this larger canvas. To understand this expansion, they depended on instruments. Chief among them was the astrolabe, made of brass with movable plates engraved with star positions. It functioned like a miniature model of the sky. You could rotate it to match the constellations overhead and quickly determine time, latitude, or direction. For sailors navigating extensive coastlines, it was essential. For rulers, it provided a way to standardize time in cities. And for the devout, it facilitated one of the most crucial religious duties, pinpointing the direction of Mecca from any location. Supporting this instrument were star tables. Abbasid astronomers compiled extensive records of the positions of planets and stars across the seasons. These enabled users to predict changes in the night sky, anchoring navigation and calendars alike. While they sometimes lent themselves to astrology, their paramount importance lay in accuracy. Merchants gained trustworthy bearings for their voyages. Officials depended on fixed time schedules. Communities could regulate prayer and fasting with greater precision. Practical as they were, these achievements also revealed a deeper scientific spirit. The Abbasids aimed not only to apply inherited knowledge, but also to test it. One of their most notable projects was an attempt to measure Earth's circumference. By taking solar observations at different locations and comparing the angles, teams could estimate the planet's full size. It represented an early form of empirical science, progressing beyond tradition to experimentation. This effort demonstrated that Abbasid inquiry valued observation just as much as inherited wisdom. Such direct measurements also held administrative significance. Imagine trying to govern a territory where travel between cities could take weeks. Without measured distances, tax schedules and postal routes became a matter of guesswork. By refining geographic data with coordinates and calculated lengths, the Abbasids provided their bureaucracy with a solid foundation. Maps became vital tools for resource planning, road management, and even military campaigns across provinces. Seafarers enjoyed similar advantages. With clearer maps and functioning instruments, captains could navigate open waters with greater confidence. This was crucial for trade routes linking the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Merchants could reach East Africa or India with less risk. Every sack of spices or bale of textiles transported along these routes supported the empire's prosperity. Astronomy and mathematics operated quietly in the background, safeguarding commerce and trade. Religious life also relied on the same tools. From the edge of the empire, a believer needed to face Mecca precisely at prayer. Geometry provided the solution. By understanding the sun's course, calendars divided the year into seasons of fasting, festivals, and daily observance. A simple astrolabe could shape devotion as accurately as it did navigation. Faith and science were not at odds. They met in solving essential problems of orientation and time. For the rulers, these developments enhanced their image. To command knowledge of earth and sky was to appear in control of both nature and empire. A caliph with accurate maps and instruments could present himself not merely as a warrior or bureaucrat, but as a guardian of a civilization rooted in reason. Maps and globes, once tools of scholars, became symbols of power in palaces. The maps themselves gained new richness. Instead of vague sketches bordered by seas, they showed rivers winding through territories, mountain ranges dividing regions, and markets positioned along trade routes. For governors, they offered planning tools. For travelers, they provided context for where they stood within vast lands. Scholars depicted the caliphate as part of an ordered whole. Viewing the empire mapped in this way made it seem coherent and unified, not just in politics, but in thought. At its core, there was synthesis. Astronomy influenced geography. Geometry provided measurements for both. Travel reports filled gaps where theory was lacking. This formed a web of disciplines that supported each other. Measuring Earth's size required mathematics and solar observations. Using the astrolabe depended on accurate star tables created through mathematical calculations. Good maps relied on geometry linked to practical accounts from merchants. Each element grew because others offered support. What stands out here is how contemporary this process feels. Treating ancient texts as hypotheses, testing them through observation, and then applying the findings for public use mirrors the scientific method today. The Abbasids asked, "What is the Earth's size? How can coordinates help us govern? How do the stars influence time?" They then collected data and refined their models accordingly. It was a dynamic, inquisitive science. The outcome was remarkable. Baghdad produced the most advanced maps of the medieval world. They revived ancient legacies, but by linking them to observation and calculation, they transformed them into something new. That change brought practical benefits. Rulers governed more effectively, traders navigated more safely, and ordinary people worshipped with unprecedented precision. By mapping the world, they also mapped the empire's position within it. While Abbasid scholars explored horizons and distances, another group turned their focus inward. They started asking new questions about the human body, how it functioned, why it fell ill, and how it could be healed. The same culture that measured skies and lands now sought to measure health itself. Why did Abbasid doctors examine urine as carefully as astronomers observed the skies? Because for them, health was governed by balance, and the most reliable way to detect imbalance was through what the body expelled. A flask of urine held at an angle to catch the light became, in effect, a tool as symbolic of medicine as the astrolabe was of astronomy. This practice may seem strange from today's perspective, but at the time, it embodied a culture of meticulous observation. Doctors were trained to read color, clarity, and even smell as signs of hidden conditions. Carrying a urine flask was almost a badge of their identity as physicians. At the center of this approach was the doctrine of the four humors. Abbasid scholars inherited this model from Galen, a Greek physician who wrote during the Roman Empire. According to him, the body depended on four vital fluids: yellow bile, blood, phlegm, and black bile. Each humor was associated with one of nature's elements: fire, air, water, and earth, and aligned with qualities such as hot or cold, wet or dry. Health meant equilibrium. A disease occurs when one fluid dominates, disrupting the balance, much like weather gone wrong when one element overwhelms the others. This framework offered more than a theoretical idea. It provided physicians with a method of diagnosis and a way to explain character. Anger and fever indicated excess yellow bile. Sadness pointed to black bile. Cheerfulness was linked to blood, while lethargy arose from too much phlegm. Entire temperaments, choleric, melancholic, sanguine, and phlegmatic, stemmed from this scheme. It created a system where physical illness, emotional disposition, and personality could all be interpreted through a standard lens. For centuries, it influenced medicine across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. However, the Abbasids did not accept Galen's words as the ultimate authority. When his texts were translated into Arabic, scholars integrated them with Persian and Indian traditions. Persian medicine contributed herbal remedies and the organization of hospitals as structured institutions. Indian texts introduced new substances and therapeutic techniques. Instead of choosing one tradition, Abbasid physicians blended them, creating a broad and pragmatic medical culture. Even within this inherited framework, questions remained. Could balancing bodily fluids truly prevent infection, heal wounds, or reduce fever? Abbasid doctors responded by testing their ideas in practice. They examined patients directly, paying close attention to their observations. Urine inspection became a highly developed diagnostic tool. Its qualities were recorded and compared. This practical approach marked a significant shift in strategy. Unlike many earlier traditions that depended heavily on reasoning, Abbasid medicine valued evidence collected through the senses. In hindsight, although their theory of humors was incorrect, this focus on observation foreshadowed the later development of scientific methods. This empirical approach was also evident in their hospitals. Abbasid rulers established formal medical centers that differed significantly from the healing shrines of earlier societies. These institutions admitted patients, organized wards, and kept systematic records. They also trained students under supervision, learning not only through books, but also through bedside instruction. Doctors and apprentices collaborated to observe cases, record outcomes, and refine their practices. Hospitals became living laboratories where evidence was gathered and skills were passed down through generations. One prominent figure emerged from this setting, Avicenna, also known as Ibn Sina. Born in 980 and living until 1037, he compiled centuries of medical knowledge in his Canon of Medicine. This extensive work presented physiology, diagnosis, and treatment within a single structured text. Avicenna drew on Galen, Persian, and Indian practices, and his own observations, organizing them clearly. The canon proved so authoritative that it remained a standard medical textbook not only throughout the Islamic world, but also in European medical schools until the 17th century. Studying medicine in Paris or Bologna often meant studying Avicenna's canon. His contributions stand among the most lasting legacies of Abbasid medicine. The canon expanded the humoral system, linking climate to health. Hot, dry regions were believed to predispose people to certain diseases, while cold, damp areas were thought to favor others. This encouraged physicians to consider the environment as a factor in illness. It meant that, while humoral theory remained the basis, doctors adapted treatments according to the specific circumstances of place and time. Within these limits, such adaptability was significant. Treatments were aimed at restoring balance where imbalance was suspected. Excessive blood might be addressed through bloodletting. If phlegm was dominant, warming foods or exercise could be used to counter it. Herbs were used to cool, dry, moisten, or warm the body, helping to rebalance the body's fluids. From today's perspective, many of these treatments seem ineffective or misguided. However, Within their system, they adhered to the principle that health depended on maintaining equilibrium. The practical organization of medicine strengthened its influence. Abbasid hospitals were often charitable foundations, sustained through endowments that ensured care for both the wealthy and the poor. Physicians were encouraged to uphold the ethical standards of confidentiality, impartiality, and compassion. Manuals combined medical details with moral guidance, training students to see themselves as both healers and servants of community well-being. This expanded the role of medicine beyond personal profit, anchoring it in public life and values. Imagine two connected scenes when picturing Abbasid medicine. In one, a physician holds up a glass vial of urine to the light as students observe and note his remarks. In another, Avicenna is seated among manuscripts, distilling centuries of material into clear prose. Both scenes illustrate the dual strength of Abbasid medicine: attentive clinical observation and well-organized knowledge. Observation and synthesis worked together seamlessly. In the long term, their achievements depended less on the factual accuracy of humoral theory than on the systems built around it. By promoting habits of careful observation, they encouraged doctors to test and record their findings. Hospitals were established as spaces where learning and treatment intersected. Detailed manuals transmitted techniques and ethics to future generations. These structures proved more enduring than the theories they supported. Long after faith in the four humors declined, hospitals, empirical record-keeping, and professional codes continued to persist. Medicine progressed because these frameworks endured. That endurance was genuine despite the limits. While earlier healers might have relied on charms or spontaneous logic, Abbasid practice provided students with wards to study, physicians' notebooks to update, and communities with institutions of care. The humoral model was inaccurate in detail, but it inspired methods that remained valuable: diagnosing through observation, recording progress, and treating within an organized institution. Those practices persisted into medieval Europe, and through Avicenna, influenced medical education for centuries. Professional medicine under the Abbasids offered a model of balance between tradition and testing, between theory and practice. It demonstrated how imperfect science could still produce durable structures. That paradox helps explain why Abbasid contributions mattered. Even false theories can foster habits and institutions that continue to shape the future. Yet, while doctors aimed to restore harmony within individual bodies, the empire itself developed ailments of a different kind. Discord grew between belief and power, creating tensions that no physician's flask could resolve. These fractures in faith would place greater strain on the caliphs than any human illness ever could. If medicine revealed the search for balance in the human body, politics revealed how fragile that balance in faith could become. The Abbasid state was shaped not only by scholars and rulers, but also by the deep rifts within Islam itself. These were the fault lines of faith, and while they began as questions of doctrine, they soon grew into political fractures that would haunt the dynasty for generations. The Abbasids rose to power with the support of Shiite groups, who hoped for a religious revival. Many Shiites believed that this new dynasty would restore a community led by the Prophet's family, guiding Islam back to what they saw as a purer path. When the Umayyads had fallen, it seemed that centuries of marginalization might finally come to an end. Yet, once the Abbasids secured Baghdad, their priorities shifted. Instead of supporting Shiite leadership, they aligned firmly with Sunni tradition. This choice had profound consequences. For Shiite supporters, It was not just a broken alliance, but a betrayal of faith. They had lent their energy to the rebellion with the promise of reform, yet faced a dynasty that ruled in ways they had opposed. The Abbasids adopted Persian-style court rituals and ceremonies, reinforcing a palace culture that was closer to monarchy than the republican simplicity valued by Shiite thought. In stark contrast, Shiites had hoped for rulership based on consultation and community, but instead encountered a caliphate that cloaked itself in the trappings of royalty. That mismatch hardened into bitterness. The Abbasids could claim broader legitimacy because most of their subjects practiced Sunni Islam, but securing majority allegiance meant sacrificing their earliest allies. Shiite disappointment was both spiritual and political in nature. They had envisioned a system where leadership was tied to the prophet's family through bloodline and humility. What eventually emerged bore the marks of the empire they had fought to replace. Resentment often turned into open unrest. In provinces with substantial Shiite populations, rebellion flared repeatedly. Movements framed in religious language provided cover for local leaders to claim autonomy and independence. Across such a vast territory, governed from a distant capital, doctrine alone did not cause revolt, but it accentuated existing grievances. Religious differences became a rallying cry for regional grievances and tax protests. Economic burdens and resentment of centralized authority found voice in sectarian arguments. The division, therefore, was more than just a theological question. It held significance in daily governance and loyalty. For those aligned with Sunni tradition, the Caliphate was a guardian of unity. For many Shiites, it symbolized exclusion. That distinction influenced everyday life, whether to trust judges, whether taxes were legitimate, and whether an appointed governor was a legitimate form of governance. Unity in belief could not be imposed from Baghdad. It had to be recognized in villages and markets, and too often it was not. You might picture the empire as a vast bridge constructed from two distinct types of stone. It seemed sturdy at first, spanning regions with a single authority. But under pressure, the joints between the rocks revealed cracks. Shiite rejection of Abbasid claims meant the Caliphate relied unevenly on its supporters. Over time, those small gaps widened into visible fissures. Baghdad itself told a different story. In its libraries and workshops, Muslims of various traditions worked closely together. Translators, copyists, and commentators sometimes collaborated side by side regardless of creed, passing ancient science into Arabic. Philosophical inquiry often blurred sectarian boundaries. To an observer in the capital, it might seem as if faith divisions melted in the pursuit of knowledge. Yet outside the city walls, loyalties fractured. Shiite scholars mistrusted a Sunni-backed caliphate. Sunni clerics often gained patronage by reinforcing the legitimacy of Abbasid power. Intellectual unity within the city sharply contrasted with political division in the provinces. This fracture jeopardized the very claim on which Abbasid legitimacy rested. The caliphs portrayed themselves as protectors of the entire Muslim community, not merely provincial rulers. To uphold that role, they needed recognition from all believers. But Shiite dissent proved their authority was limited, not universal. Instead of appearing above a faction, a caliph could be seen as the defender of one faction at the expense of another. That perception weakened the moral basis of their rule. The consequences were felt almost immediately. When Shiite uprisings rippled through different regions, they eroded the sense of unchallengeable power. Each rebellion recounted a story of broken promises. The memory of being courted during the revolution, but then pushed aside after victory, became a persistent theme in Shiite identity. Fathers told their sons of betrayal. Communities recalled the shift to monarchy, as proof that justice had been denied. This ongoing bitterness meant disputes never fully healed. And sectarian tension rarely existed alone. It overlapped with practical difficulties in governing such a vast territory. A governor struggling to collect taxes could see resentment grow fiercer once locals believed the ruler lacked spiritual legitimacy. Complaints about revenue, land, or privileges merged with religious defiance. What might have been economic riots or regional discontent often hardened into ideological opposition. These were urgent issues for the caliphs because their authority depended as much on moral symbolic power as on military strength. The Abbasids presented themselves not simply as warlords, but as reformers, heirs to the Prophet's mission. They vowed to restore Islam's purity, yet Shiite rejection exposed the fragility of that claim. Power persisted, but the story that justified it lost credibility. Without acceptance from all sects, Baghdad's caliphs spoke less as guardians of religion and more as supporters of one particular interpretation. The irony was striking. Baghdad's scholars could set aside their differences to measure stars, translate Aristotle, or compile medical texts. In the world of study, shared goals allowed diversity to function. But in the realm of politics, creed remained sharper than compromise. Learning could cross boundaries. Authority could not. This duality shaped the Abbasid legacy. From the outside, the empire glittered with cosmopolitan brilliance. From within, provinces increasingly pulled away. Revolts became a regular part of governance, and claims of universal unity rang hollow. Religion offered inspiration for cooperation in some areas, but served as a rallying cry for separation in others. The caliphs cultivated a city of universal knowledge, yet they presided over an empire where their authority had lost universal recognition. So, the legacy of the Abbasids was paradoxical. They embodied cosmopolitan achievement, but presided over sectarian division. They built libraries for the world, but could not persuade all believers to accept their claim as leaders of the faithful. As these divisions grew sharper, the strain was felt not only in faith or politics, but also in the very costs of governing a divided empire, which began to push towards breaking point. Across provinces and cities, the burdens of supporting courts, armies, and administration pressed ever more challenging year after year. Those who already felt excluded from the Abbasids' spiritual embrace began to see these burdens less as duties and more as impositions. The next challenge the caliphs faced was no less dangerous than rebellion in the name of creed. It was the struggle over resources and whether the empire could survive the weight placed on its own people. When examining the machinery of Abbasid rule, one element explains much of its strength and subsequent weakness: taxes. This was primarily a tax-paying state, and its engine depended on revenue. Money from across the empire funded the army, the court, and the bureaucracy. Without these flows, neither soldiers nor scribes could operate. Taxes were not an incidental matter. They formed the foundation of government. Initially, this system functioned effectively. Revenue collection financed a formidable standing army, paid administrators who managed records over thousands of kilometers, and supported a court in Baghdad that asserted legitimacy through splendor. Palaces, mosques, bridges, and libraries bore the mark of state wealth and prosperity. To the subjects, taxes appeared to promise order and protection in return. You paid, and in theory, you received stability. However, maintaining such an empire entailed rising costs. Soldiers had to be stationed in distant provinces, governors required allowances to enforce their rule, and officials increased in number with every administrative expansion. The capital itself consumed enormous sums to maintain the ceremony. A caliph claiming universal authority could not afford to appear modest in presentation. He was at the center of faith and governance, and that role demanded a visible display. Each display imposed a cost that communities far from Baghdad were compelled to bear. This ongoing demand for revenue transformed the relationship between rulers and the ruled. Initially, Abbasid administrators gained praise for their efficiency. They kept detailed records of land, harvests, and dues. Villages experienced tax assessments organized in a manner that earlier empires seldom matched. However, what appeared fair on paper could feel oppressive in practice. Assessments were sent from distant scribes who knew little of local hardships. A poor harvest or flood often did not reduce the demand. For those working the land, the caliph became less a protector and more a distant collector. Familiar people quickly felt the burden. Farmers dreaded revenue officials' visits. Merchants resented tolls on their goods. Resentment led to quiet resistance. Some underreported harvests, others hid grain, and some bribed tax collectors to reduce their payments. These acts spread, and evasion became a routine part of life. Compliance weakened not just from isolated revolts, but as a widespread habit across regions. The empire's vast size exacerbated this trend. Near Baghdad, officials could still closely monitor and enforce obligations. But in the far reaches, North Africa, Persia, Central Asia, the distance lessened their control. Couriers and soldiers could not always gather or enforce taxes consistently. Many communities now pay what local authorities demand instead of what Baghdad sets. The flow of wealth to the capital slowed, but the demands for contributions never stopped. This disconnect eroded not only revenue, but also loyalty. A caliph who styled himself as the protector of Islam was expected to uphold fairness as well as order. Yet the more taxes pressed without visible return, the less his subjects saw him as legitimate. Instead of sharing in a universal mission, many now viewed taxation as a burden imposed on them to sustain extravagance at the center. The symbolic weight of the caliphate began to clash with the everyday burden of dues. The cycle fed itself. Declining revenues starved the army of reliable pay, making soldiers less effective and more prone to mutiny. To compensate, rulers increased demands, which in turn deepened evasion. Governors struggled to enforce rules when peasants abandoned fields or caravans turned back to avoid levies. With each missed payment, the gap between image and reality widened. Factional struggles in Baghdad worsened perceptions. Imperial wealth became the prize of competing court factions. Ministers and grandees relied on access to tax income to sustain their power. To a villager or merchant, it appeared as if their dues funded not justice or protection, but rivalry among elites. That impression weakened the moral bond between center and periphery. Taxes seemed less a collective duty than a drain imposed from afar. At the same time, local rulers recognized the benefits of keeping wealth within their regions. In fertile provinces like Egypt or areas with strong trade networks, it was appealing to avoid sending revenue elsewhere and instead build their own power. Why dispatch caravans of treasure to Baghdad if the same funds could support a local army and court? This mindset encouraged practical independence. Fiscal pressure didn't just burden peasants, it also motivated ambitious governors and generals to assert their authority. You can think of the empire as a vast reservoir with tributary streams designed to fill it. Initially, water flowed in freely, and the center thrived. However, As upstream communities began diverting the flow, the reservoir began to shrink. Over time, it could no longer sustain the network it was meant to serve. The Abbasid treasury functioned like that reservoir, and withholding revenue signaled the decline of central power. The system's unevenness worsened the situation. Not all provinces could afford equal dues. Fertile lands were subsidized, while less productive areas were overlooked despite uniform assessments. Some communities struggled under demands they could not meet, while others exploited weak oversight to contribute little. Reform might have addressed this, but it risked causing unrest. Confronted with this dilemma, rulers often chose rigidity. The result was widespread resentment, with no real improvement in fairness. Over the decades, the meaning of the caliphate in provincial eyes narrowed. Where once it symbolized unity of belief and access to a broader order, it now represented tax collectors and broken promises. Local mosques and rulers began to seem more immediate, more trustworthy. Allegiance shifted from an ideal of universal faith to the practical reality of who could provide protection nearby. The state's tax-based structure, initially so effective, now hastened its fragmentation. The Abbasids did not collapse in a single fiscal crisis. They weakened through countless small failures, missing tribute, corrupt collectors, rebellions driven by assessments, and provinces hoarding receipts. Taxes had funded the empire's army, its palaces, and its authority. But when they became unbearable, they undermined the very foundations they were meant to uphold. This steady erosion had political effects far beyond financial records. Provinces grew used to acting independently, sending fewer resources and prioritizing their own needs first. Once this habit developed, the central state became more symbolic than actual. As wealth drained away from Baghdad, what mattered more than the lost revenue was what it signified: the diminishing ability of the caliph to command obedience throughout his realm. By the time this process was complete, the link between the center and the periphery was already weakening. Wealth stayed in local hands, and from wealth, independent authority grew. That was the deeper cost of fiscal decline. Not only poverty for the capital, but strength for those prepared to stand apart. And when regions had both motive and means, they no longer heeded Baghdad. By the 10th century, the unity of the Abbasid world existed more in memory than in fact. The empire that had once been the universal heart of Islam began splitting into separate dynasties, each confident enough to ignore the caliph in Baghdad. The symbolic title of caliph persisted, but authority was fragmenting into competing centers of power. One of the clearest breaks appeared in the far west. The Umayyads, whom the Abbasids had overthrown so violently in the mid-8th century, survived through a single branch of the family that escaped to Iberia. There, in exile, they carved out an independent emirate in Cordoba. For decades, they maintained a degree of separation, claiming authority locally, but still leaving the title of caliph to Baghdad. That restraint ended in 929, when the Umayyad ruler of Cordoba declared the title for himself. The proclamation of a rival caliphate sharpened the split into something impossible to ignore. This was no longer just a province breaking loose. It was a counterclaim to lead the Muslim community as a whole. Cordoba, enriched by agriculture and Iberian trade, blossomed into a court of learning, architecture, and splendor that mirrored Baghdad's achievements while standing boldly apart. Here was the sharp irony of Abbasid power. The dynasty that had crushed its rivals in Damascus now saw its descendants ruling as caliphs in Spain, wielding both independence and prestige. For many in the West, the reverence for Baghdad faded into the distance. Authority was local, prosperous, and no longer needed Eastern approval. Further along the Mediterranean, Egypt marked perhaps the most significant break. In the 10th century, the Shiite Fatimids established an independent dynasty centered on Cairo. Their rise not only deprived Baghdad of one of its wealthiest provinces, but also heightened sectarian divisions as they challenged the Sunni Abbasids on both political and religious grounds. Control of Egypt's fertile Nile Valley and access to the Mediterranean and Red Sea trade transformed the Fatimids into formidable rivals. With Cairo thriving as a capital, the resources that once sustained the Abbasid court now powered a dynasty offering believers an alternative sense of legitimacy. In a single move, Egypt's wealth and influence shifted to a competing center, leaving Baghdad diminished both materially and spiritually. East of Iraq, the empire's cohesion weakened in slower but equally significant ways. Across Persia and the eastern provinces, regional rulers increasingly acted as sovereigns, collecting taxes, raising armies, and issuing local commands, often without consulting Baghdad. Unlike the bold assertions of Caliphate in Spain or Egypt, these rulers rarely claimed the universal mantle. But their practical independence was clear. What mattered was not whose name was in the Friday sermon, but whose soldiers enforced the law and whose officials collected revenue. By the 10th century, Baghdad's claim over these territories was more ritual than real. This transformation reshaped the caliph's role into a paradox. He remained the leader of the faithful in theory. His name was still invoked in mosques and court ceremonies, and his seal still wielded influence across much of the Islamic world. Yet in practice, subjects increasingly turned to their own dynasties for protection, administration, and justice. Symbolic reverence persisted, but effective control steadily waned. The caliph held a title that symbolized unity, even as his domain shrank to a fragment of authority centered around Baghdad. Such a decline prompted a crucial question. Did the caliph lose only territory, or had he also lost legitimacy? In one sense, prestige lingered. Breakaway rulers often maintained Abbasid ceremonial traditions, from court etiquette to architectural styles, as if to suggest a sense of continuity. Displaying the grandeur of Baghdad, even as it distanced itself from its authority, demonstrated how profoundly Abbasid culture had influenced the Islamic world. However, this imitation was double-edged. Rivals could adopt the ceremonial aspects while stripping them of loyalty, reflecting Baghdad's image without requiring its approval. The caliphate's splendor thus became a model that was no longer exclusive. Pressures from outside the empire increased the urgency of its decline. Along the borders, raiders, tribes, and rival powers pressed hard. These frontier challenges required money for defense and reinforcements that Baghdad no longer possessed. Provinces that withheld taxes meant armies went unpaid, and when attacks occurred, protection often came not from the caliph's banners, but from local rulers. Such patterns made loyalty to Baghdad seem distant, while loyalty to nearby dynasties felt more practical. Each unguarded raid or failed defense further eroded the caliph's authority. Religious rivalries deepened the divisions. The Fatimids offered an alternative authority for Shiite believers, presenting Cairo as the seat of the rightful caliphate. Against them, the Sunni Abbasids could do little more than assert their claim. Empty declarations failed to reassure communities as Cairo's prosperity grew. Across the Islamic world, believers now faced a fractured religious map, with 2, and in Spain, 3, separate centers claiming universal leadership. The very idea of one ummah, one united community of faith under a single caliph, was falling apart. By the late 10th century, what had once appeared to outsiders as the greatest empire on earth now resembled a patchwork mosaic. Spain thrived as a Umayyad Caliphate. Egypt projected Shiite power from Cairo. Persia and the eastern regions were, in practice, governed by local dynasts. Baghdad remained a city rich in history, but the caliph himself saw his authority diminish in all directions. His influence was strong in sermons and inscriptions, but faded in terms of armies, revenues, or land. To visualize this change, imagine a large chandelier originally hanging from a single central chain. Initially, the crystals shone together as one. As the chain weakened, pieces became loose and swung independently, each still catching and reflecting light. The brilliance persisted, but no longer as a unified entity. Instead of a single trunk from which cultural and scientific growth spread, there were multiple centers: Cordoba, Cairo, the Eastern courts, each shining in its own right. For the Abbasids, this created a strange mix of shame and endurance. Shame, because the empire they claimed as universal now shrank into a smaller core. Endurance, because the line of caliphs continued in Baghdad despite decline. Even when reduced to a symbolic role, the caliphate survived. Later dynasties still sought its approval to strengthen their legitimacy, using the prestige of the title even when the office wielded little power. What defined the Abbasids' later centuries was this duality: a caliph who was a sacred figurehead but lacked real temporal power, a dynasty whose cultural influence stretched across the Islamic world even as their own empire fragmented. Their model of courtly splendor, scientific patronage, and centralized ritual endured in imitation, but their control had become mostly ceremonial, while rivals claimed full sovereignty. And if the Islamic world struggled against the limits of size, distance, and loyalty, it was not alone. In the same century, across the Mediterranean, another empire was also cracking apart under similar pressure. Across the lands once ruled by Charlemagne, the same problem of scale soon led to fragmentation. His empire spanned large parts of Europe, but within a few generations, it began to disintegrate. The story of the Carolingians is often told through the Treaty of Verdun, agreed upon in 843. That agreement divided Charlemagne's realm into three. West Francia went to Charles the Bald, East Francia to Louis the German, and the long, fragile Middle Kingdom to Lothar. What appeared to be a unified, rising empire quickly became three competing realms. Under Charlemagne himself, authority seemed strong. He extended borders deep into Italy, beyond the Pyrenees, and across much of Germany. At his coronation in Rome, he could claim a connection to the ancient Caesars. However, his achievement was based on unity, centered around a single extraordinary figure. Once succession passed to his son Louis the Pious, the cracks immediately appeared. Unlike a local kingdom, an empire of this size could not simply be divided among sons. Division meant more than land. It shattered networks of loyalty and resources. The Treaty of Verdun settled these rival claims, but it did not fully resolve them. West Francia would, over centuries, develop into France. East Francia became the foundation of the German territories. In the middle, Lothar inherited the title of emperor with his middle kingdom, the so-called Lotharingia, a long strip stretching from the Low Countries to Italy. It proved nearly impossible to defend or govern. Its people spoke different languages, relied on various trade routes, and faced attacks from all sides. This middle realm, lacked stability from the start, and that weakness became a seed for centuries of conflict. Comparisons with the Abbasids are evident. The Abbasid caliphs incorporated Persian and Indian traditions, but faltered as distance and sectarian disputes divided them. The Carolingians faced dynastic conflicts among brothers and the diverse influences of regions that refused to unify into a single state. What both worlds shared was the challenge of maintaining control over vast territories after the initial ruler's death. Neither a caliph in Baghdad nor an emperor in Aachen could command the exact obedience from afar as Charlemagne or the early Abbasids managed in person. The structural foundations of their authority also differed. Abbasid rule depended on a sophisticated taxation system, with documented dues-funding armies, scholars, and palaces alike. When that system declined, central authority diminished. Conversely, the Carolingians lacked a formal bureaucracy. They lacked stable tax revenue and comprehensive records. Their power was based on land grants, loot from military campaigns, and personal bonds of loyalty between lords and vassals. This system worked when kings were strong, but it offered little structure to withstand disputes among heirs. The most significant decline occurred as local nobles began treating their offices as personal property. Dukes and counts handed down positions to their sons, no longer viewing themselves as temporary servants of the crown. This shift resembled developments in Abbasid provinces, where local governors withheld taxes and became practically independent. In both eastern and western regions, central authority became hollow as real power shifted into local hands. The difference was that in Europe, this process solidified into feudal structures, where military power and land were linked through personal contracts. In contrast, the Islamic world saw prosperous, independent capitals like Cordoba or Cairo claim both sovereignty and prestige. This loss of cohesion made external assaults more perilous. For the Carolingians, the most evident threat came from the Vikings. Sailing up rivers or attacking exposed coasts, they penetrated deep into lands that kings could not defend simultaneously. The raiders were opportunists, but their success depended on Carolingian vulnerabilities: slow communication, poor roads, and a lack of central authority. Communities often had to defend themselves, either paying off or resisting invaders with little support from kings. To peasants and towns, loyalty to distant rulers seemed less useful than relying on local lords who built their own defenses. Abbasid territories faced similar challenges from tribal incursions and external raids. In both empires, external enemies triumphed because internal bonds had weakened. Lothar's imperial title also revealed the fragility of institutions under pressure. He bore the name of Emperor after Verdun, but with his kingdom stretched thin, the dignity was superficial. Soon, his lands further fragmented, and the imperial title lost its significance. This mirrors the later Abbasid Caliphate, where declaring loyalty to a caliph held little meaning once provinces largely ignored him. In both the East and the West, grand titles like Emperor and Caliph persisted, yet without armies and resources supporting them, they were mere words rather than actual authority. The parallels highlight a pattern of overstretch. An exceptional founder amasses territories, claims universality, and builds momentum. Successors inherit something that seems strong but is fundamentally fragile, upheld by reputation and memory rather than institutions. When disputes over succession emerge alongside regional ambitions, the structure begins to falter. Local leaders transform temporary power into hereditary rights. External invaders identify weaknesses and capitalize on them. The outcome is a slow disintegration. not a total collapse into nothingness, but a splintering into multiple smaller centers. For the Carolingians, Verdun represented both a conclusion and a new beginning. It marked the end of the concept of a single, united empire under Charlemagne's lineage. Yet it also signaled the formation of states still recognized today: France in the west, Germany in the east, and instability through the middle region of Lotharingia, where borders often remained undefined or unsettled. The story of the Abbasids was similar. Unity fractured, but Cordoba, Cairo, and Baghdad each continued to hold significance in their own ways. The decline of central authority fostered new cultural and political landscapes rather than silence. The 9th and 10th centuries were not solely characterized by growing splendor in Baghdad or Charlemagne's vision of a restored Rome. They also serve as a reminder of the fragility of such visions. Grandeur at the top could not indefinitely suppress ambitions and resentments at the bottom. Empires could expand rapidly, acquiring land and people swiftly, but maintaining that scale over time required stronger frameworks than personality or symbolism. In both Islam and Europe, those frameworks proved too fragile. The comparison is striking, but also sobering. The Abbasids lost provinces and saw rivals become caliphs. The Carolingians divided their empire among quarreling heirs and experienced an increase in Viking raids, which accelerated the shift towards regional powers. Both realized that broad imperial ambitions could not be reconciled with the practical demands of governance. They demonstrate how the ideal of unity faltered in the face of everyday politics, weak administration, and regional interests. What followed was transformation, not disappearance. The Abbasids persisted as symbolic figures. The concept of a caliphate endured. In Europe, the imperial title remained, but it needed constant renewal, and feudal monarchies emerged in practice. Neither the West nor the East preserved the universal empire they once claimed, but both laid the groundwork for the worlds that came after. In short, both empires discovered that the grand aspiration of universal rule could not withstand everyday politics and local pressures. From this realization, you can understand how the year 1000 marked a significant turning point for both civilizations. What happened next after the empires fragmented? By the year 1000, both the Islamic world and Europe existed in landscapes transformed by centuries of strain and adaptation. Although the Abbasid Caliphate and the Carolingian Empire had lost the unity of their original visions, the remnants laid the groundwork for futures beyond their control. This period has been called a 1,000-year turning point because the changes it initiated still resonate today. In Europe, one of the most notable developments was the Christianization of territories that had once fought alongside or against Christendom as outsiders. Scandinavia, Iceland, Bohemia, Hungary, and early Russian states joined the Christian fold during the late 10th and early 11th centuries. A significant milestone occurred in 988 when Prince Vladimir of Kievan Rus formally accepted baptism, bringing his realm into the sphere of influence of Byzantium and Rome. This act was not merely a declaration of faith, but also a clever political move, linking a rising Eastern power to wider trade networks and alliances. For leaders in these regions, Christianity offered more than religious rights. It provided access to diplomatic circles, opportunities for intermarriage with established dynasties, and entry into the institutions of literacy and law carried by Latin Christianity. Scandinavians, who had once raided monasteries, now established their own churches. the Slavic lands began developing literate cultures connected to sacred texts. In each case, conversion facilitated entry into a continental system that promised legitimacy, trade, and recognition. The effect was transformative. By 1000, Europe's cultural landscape extended far beyond the Mediterranean basin. Christianity now united lands from Ireland to Iceland, from the Danube to the Russian steppes. This shared framework helped standardize expectations about morality, kingship, and legitimacy. A noble in Hungary might find common cause with a ruler in France through the liturgy they both followed, or the ties their priests shared. What had been a patchwork of separate peoples was being woven into a continent-wide fabric, connected through belief and reinforced by practice. At the same time, the Byzantine Empire remained a lasting thread of continuity. While smaller in scope than ancient Rome, Byzantium demonstrated a resilience that the Western Empire had never achieved. It withstood waves of invasion from Arabs, Bulgars, and steppe nomads. It adapted its armies, fortified its cities, and restructured its provinces. Even when shrinking, it linked its authority to Constantinople, a city that radiated wealth and devotion. This persistence mattered beyond its borders. The Byzantine clergy oversaw conversions across Eastern Europe, including Vladimir's decision in Kiev to embrace Christianity. Byzantine art, architecture, and law spread alongside faith, providing models of statecraft to neighbors. Where Western Europe had fragmented into competing kingdoms, Byzantium projected an image of continuity, a Roman Christian empire that still stood centuries after the West had collapsed. Across the Islamic world, the pattern appeared different once again. By 1000, the Abbasids no longer held sway over Spain, Egypt, or Persia. Rival caliphs claimed legitimacy in Cordoba and Cairo, while local dynasties established practical independence elsewhere. The symbol of caliphal supremacy persisted, but the reality was a mosaic. Yet paradoxically, this was the period when Abbasid scholarly achievements spread most broadly. Baghdad emerged as the center of translation and innovation. Within its house of wisdom, Greek philosophy was translated into Arabic, blended with Persian and Indian influences, and generated ideas that would later flow westwards into Europe. The mathematical treatises of scholars like Al-Khwarizmi systematized algebra and the use of zero, concepts now so fundamental they underpin our daily calculations. Astronomical star tables and detailed medical manuals crossed languages and generations, shaping knowledge from Cairo to Toledo and beyond. Here lies a fundamental contrast. Politically, Abbasid unity had broken down. Intellectually, their influence expanded further than ever before through science, mathematics, and medicine. In Europe, the opposite was true. Its empire had fractured into rival kingdoms, but its intellectual revival, modest as it was under the Carolingians, persisted. At Charlemagne's court, scholars promoted a cultural renaissance aimed at standardizing worship and securing Christian learning. Part of this effort was the creation of the Carolingian minuscule script. The clear form of its letters laid the groundwork for European literacy, and it remains the reason our own alphabet has its familiar shape today. That legacy endured long after the Carolingian Empire itself disintegrated. By comparing the two legacies, you can see the balance more clearly. The Abbasids lost ground as rulers, but made advances as scholars. Their translations, algebra, and astronomical studies traveled beyond their political reach. The Carolingians failed to maintain their political structure, but sowed intellectual seeds that shaped literacy and written culture for centuries. Each empire fractured, but each left something vital behind. This context also explains why historians view Europe's rise after the year 1000 cautiously. It would be wrong to say Europe suddenly dominated at this date. Instead, the ingredients for future growth were beginning to form. Christian networks connected scattered regions. Monasteries and courts fostered learning that would develop into the scholasticism of the 12th century. Political units solidified into more defined realms, but the complete transformation of Europe into a continent of strong states was still centuries away. By 1000, the foundations had been laid, but the process of weaving them together was far from finished. What we can say is that collapse did not mean emptiness. Instead, fragments became roots for new growth. In Islam, the loss of central control did not erase scientific achievement. It preserved and spread it. In Europe, the splintering that followed Charlemagne did not erase his Renaissance. It embedded scripts, texts, and liturgy for later centuries. In Byzantium, resilience offered continuity that knit Eastern Christianity more tightly into Europe's cultural map. For me, the image is not of ruins, but of shoots rising from cut stumps. The Abbasid Caliphate, reduced to Baghdad, still nourished scholars whose works circulated the globe. The Carolingian Empire, divided into 3 parts, still produced a script that influences how you read and write today. And the Byzantines, though battered, kept aloft the flame of Roman order in the East. These were transformations that carried significance far beyond any single dynasty. The diversity of this moment is its most striking quality. The Islamic lands emerged as a world of several centers, each flourishing with learning and commerce. Europe solidified into distinct kingdoms, yet all were united by faith and literacy. Byzantium remained a cornerstone, its endurance shaping the Orthodox East. This mixture of fragmentation and foundation explains why the year 1000 is seen as a turning point, less about collapse and more about redirection. Take a step back, and a rhythm becomes evident. Unity, fracture, survival, continuity. When political structures weaken, ideas and institutions often endure longer, forging paths no original rulers could have predicted. Though states rose and fell, their scientific, intellectual, and cultural legacies persisted unmistakably, laying the groundwork for what followed. This perspective offers one last lesson. Empires may fade swiftly, but what survives is what they record, translate, or teach. As you reflect on this 1000-year threshold, you begin to see the power of knowledge to outlast power itself, a theme that guides us toward our final reflection. The Abbasids remind us that empires rise and fall, but the ideas they nurture endure. Their armies faltered and their territories receded, yet their sciences and philosophies spread far and wide, shaping cultures well beyond Baghdad. Algebra, astronomy, and medicine did not vanish with the dynasty. They became part of the shared legacy of subsequent civilizations. Collapse, then, is not merely destruction. It dismantles old structures while allowing new roots to take hold. Scripts, sciences, and traditions that continue to influence the world today.